Hey everybody, Connor here today at etrailer.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar here for our 2018 Jayco Greyhawk. So there's actually quite a few different options out there on the market to help improve the suspension and handling of your motorhome. However, the Rear Anti-Sway Bar, which we're going to be talking about now, is going to be the most worthwhile and beneficial improvement you can make. If you're going to be making more than one, I definitely recommend starting with the Rear Anti-Sway Bar. So what the Rear Sway Bar basically does is it's going to provide a stronger link between the body of our motorhome and the chassis. So now we're going to go ahead and take our speed bump course here with our factory sway bars here to show you the difference it's going to make when we install the upgraded sway bars. So right away, we can definitely feel our motorhome shifting side to side. There's definitely going to be a lot of rocking and body roll. I suspect you're going to see a lot of this when we pass large trucks on the highway as well, and we have that big gust of wind hit the side of our RV. So now we're going to head on over to our slalom course here. We're going to get up to speed and we're going to make some evasive maneuvers. We can definitely feel when we make those sharp turns. If we had to avoid something on the highway at speed, we're definitely going to feel a lot of rocking back and forth in our motorhome here due to the weight transferring side to side. So now with our sway bars installed, we're going to head back over to our speed bump course here at eTrailer, see if we can notice a difference. So yeah, right away we can definitely feel we have a little bit more control. Our steering isn't jerking so much, and when we do hit those bumps there and rock our coach here, we don't have that sort of lingering rocking feeling anymore. It seems to be a little bit more connected to our chassis, and we get control a little bit sooner. Now we're going to head back over to our slalom course here. And again, right away, it feels a lot smoother. We don't have that lingering rocking feeling, and it's not nearly as violent rocking back and forth. So most motorhomes actually already come with the Rear Anti-Sway Bar. However, our Roadmaster Sway Bar is going to provide us with a few benefits over the factory one. Number one, and perhaps most notable, is it's going to be much thicker. And what this thicker material is, it's going to make it much more durable and rigid, and it's going to provide a better link between the chassis and body that we talked about. So it's going to be able to reduce more of that body roll. And number two is, we're actually going to be replacing the rubber bushings that can sort of deteriorate over time with polyurethane bushings, which are going to be much more durable and last much longer. So here's what our sway bar actually looks like installed. It's going to be a full replacement for the Rear Anti-Sway Bar, replacing the end links as well. So in regards to installation, I definitely encourage you guys to try this one at home by yourself. We don't need any special tools really, and we really don't have to have a lot of mechanical knowledge. We actually don't even need to lift the RV either. We can use its own landing gear to give us a little bit more room to work, but even then, that's not really required. So let's jump right into the installation and show you how it's done. So if we come to the back of our RV here, we're going to look directly in front or behind of our rear axle here. We're going to see this thick blue circular bar here, and this is our Rear Anti-Sway Bar. This is actually what we're going to be replacing today with this installation. So now we're going to come directly in front of our rear axle here, and if we take a look behind our leaf spring stack here, we're going to see one of two of our end links that we need to remove. So we have this bolt up top here. We're going to need a 15mm box wrench to get that out. We're not going to be able to fit a socket in there, so we are going to need an open-ended / box wrench. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this now. Now there's not a nut on the back or anything that we need to hold, so we should just be able to turn this to get it out. And again, we're going to have one on each side. They're both going to have to come out. We also don't need to worry about supporting the rear sway bar here, since the sway bar is pretty much going to be in the resting position while our suspension is loaded. If we lifted it by the frame, then we would need to go ahead and support the rear sway bar, but the instructions don't recommend this, so neither do I. So now that we have our end links removed, we're going to come under the frame here, under the rear axle in particular. You're going to see these sort of U-clamp brackets here, which hold the sway bar to our rear axle. Now we're going to have a bolt on either side. We need to remove these both on either sides of the bolts here and on both sides of the coach. So we're going to go ahead and just spray these down now with some lubricant to help in removing them. So So now we're going to take our 17mm wrench. We're going to go ahead and remove all 4 of these bolts. And again, we have 2 on each side here. We're going to be using a open-ended box wrench because you're not going to have enough room behind the bolt here in our bracket to be able to fit a socket on there. We're also going to want to make sure we loosen both bolts equally. We don't just want to take one entirely off and then do the other one, because then we could run into some binding issues. So now we're going to take our sway bar out of the box here, along with our saddle bushings and saddle brackets. We're also going to have this greenish blue grease that comes in our kit here. What we need to do now is we're going to take this grease and we're going to thoroughly coat the inside of these bushings here. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we have plenty of grease here, so we can be pretty liberal when we're applying this in here. But when we're done, it should look about like that. Now we'll just go ahead and do the other one as well. So now that we have both of our bushings nice and lubed up, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our sway bar along with our bushings and brackets. We're going to slide it under the coach here. We're going to roughly align our sway bar to where the factory one was. That way we know where to place our bushings at on the actual bar. It should be somewhere in this area here, but we want to double check by test fitting it first. So now we've got it about where we think it's going to install it up here. We're going to be aligning it with these 2-hole brackets here that are attached to the bottom of our axle tube. So now we can open up our bushings and slide them on sort of in this location that we pointed out earlier. And then we're going to rotate them up. We can follow this up with our bracket here, just like that. So before we go ahead and set our sway bar up into position here, let's go ahead and get our hardware ready. We're going to be reusing the same 10mm bolts that we took out from the factory anti-sway bar, but we're going to use these washers that come in our kit here. And we're also going to be using some red Loctite on the threads here. So we want to make sure we repeat this process for our other 3 bolts here before we place them up onto the coach. Now if we have an extra set of hands, that's definitely going to help us out here, but we should be able to lift the sway bar up into position by ourselves with one arm so we can get one of the bolts on. If you have a set of jack stands that are small enough to fit under this axle here, that's definitely going to be helpful as well, so we don't have to use quite as much muscle to get it up into place. So a little tip, if you're doing this by yourself, you want to go ahead and get 1 bolt in on each side to help hold it in place, and then you should be able to get the other 2. So now that we have all of our bolts started, we're going to come back with the same 17mm socket and wrench we used to remove them to just snug everything up now, and then we can go ahead and torque everything down to spec. Keep in mind, we want to alternate tightening on both sides of our bracket here. Now we can go ahead and torque everything down to the specifications and our instructions. So now we're going to take our end links here, we're going to go ahead and attach these to the sway bar. In order to do this, we're going to be using our hex bolts here along with our nylock nut, and then we're going to need 3 flat washers. We're going to have 1 flat washer here behind the bolt head between the end link. Then we're going to have another flat washer. Then we're going to slide this hole or this part of the bolt through the opening in our sway bar, and then we're going to follow it up with another flat washer and our lock nut. We'll show you that now. we're going to be attaching it to the outside of our sway bar here. We're not going to tighten anything down right now. We're just going to have everything finger tight as far as the end link goes. So just like that. Now that we have our end link installed, we can go ahead and repeat this process on the other side. So the next thing we need to do is we're actually going to be drilling a few new holes here for our end links. But before we do that, we need to make sure that the sway bar is in the correct position and it's as parallel to the ground as we can get it. We're just using some adjustable lift pads here. If you have some jack stands at home, maybe a couple blocks of wood, anything we can use to sort of prop this up to hold it while we drill our holes. But again, we just need the sway bar to be parallel to the ground as much as possible. So now that we have our sway bar parallel to the ground, we're going to take our end link here and we're actually going to make the end link perpendicular to the ground as best we can. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mock it up sort of in the position. Luckily on this side, we have the parking brake cable that'll help hold our end link to where we can get where we think we're going to need it for it to be parallel. Now what we did is we just went ahead and marked it up, sort of went back, adjusted it a little bit. Then what we did next is, in order to mark the inside of our hole here, you can't really stick a paint marker in there. So we just went ahead and used a punch tool. This one's sort of self-actuated. We just went ahead and made a small little mark the best we could in the center of that hole once we felt that the end link was perpendicular to the ground rather. And then we came back, we removed our end link, and we took a paint marker here and we just sort of marked out our hole our hole that we punched out there. So now that we have our hole marked here that we need to drill, we're going to go ahead and check on the back side of the frame to make sure there aren't any components that we could damage when we push our drill through. But we'll just go ahead and repeat this process on the other side, then we can start to drill it out. So we're going to drill our holes out now. What we're going to do is we're going to start with an 1/8 inch drill bit just to get a pilot's hole, and then we can come back and drill our hole to our final size, which is going to be 17/32, just slightly over a 1/2 inch. So now that we have our pilot hole drilled, we can come back with our 17/32 drill bit and enlarge them to the final size. So now that we have our hole drilled, we can go ahead and mock up our end link here using our provided hardware. We're going to be taking one of our bolts here along with the flat washer. Then we're going to slide that through one of the ends on our end link. We're going to follow this up on the other side with a flat washer here. Then we can go ahead and put the other end of the bolt through the frame. On the back side of the frame, we're going to have a flat washer, then our nylock nut. So let's go ahead and do that now. And we're just going to finger tighten this bolt for now. But once we get this side completed, we can go ahead and do this exact same process on the other side. Then we can tighten everything down. So now that we have both the upper and lower side of our end link attached to the frame and the sway bar respectively, we can go ahead and torque everything down with a 19mm socket and wrench. We're going to be torquing these bolts down to the values supplied in our instructions. And that's going to do it for our look and installation of Roadmaster's Rear Anti-Sway Bar here for our 2018 Jayco Greyhawk.